And I know that you're horrible, but I know what kind of God I serve. The priests went into the sanctuary of the temple of the Lord to cleanse it, and they took out the temple courtyard, all the defiled things they found. And from there, the Levites carted it all out to the Kidron Valley. They began the work in early spring on the first day of the new year, and in the 8 days, they had reached the entry room of the Lord's temple. Then they purified the temple of the Lord itself, which took another 8 days. So the entire task was completed in 16 days. The Levites went to King Hezekiah and gave him this report. We have cleansed the entire temple of the Lord, the altar of burnt offerings with all its utensils, and the table of the bread of the presence with all its utensils. We've also recovered all the items discarded by King Ahaz when he was unfaithful and closed the temple. They are now in front of the altar of the Lord, purified and ready for use. As we've been talking through homecoming, and I've just been using some familiar movies, for these few verses, I just want to put a simple tag on it: stomp the yard, stomp the yard. Lord, speak, your people need to hear. Let us get in the posture of receiving. It's interesting for many of us as we understand this moment, and I will tell you this series has been very nostalgic for me from this perspective. It's reconnected me with some shows and some movies that were very pivotal for me. It's always good to do some extracurricular research, and as we were trying to put our series together and trying to put names and connections with things of our cultural value, these movies, these shows were important because I think that they really began the essence of explaining and lifting out what I want to share in the messages that are before you. From the different world to school days and the other ones that we'll be sharing, I had to go back and do some research. I had to make sure that I reconnected with the movies to find something in them that once again would share the lesson that we were trying to convey. And today's message is entitled Stomp the Yard, which comes after that movie that was brought out in 2007. It highlighted a star by the name of Columbus Short, and he was playing a character by the name of DJ. He was playing this character that finally got into this fictional college, university called Truth University. The real essence of the story in the movie is this coming-of-age narrative of DJ finding his way, learning community, and seeing the essence of what it means to live in this environment. But in the midst of it, it is Stomp the Yard. So it does highlight for many people our Divine Nine, the different fraternities and sororities. But for DJ, he finds himself in this weird space of being recruited by two fictional fraternities. One is called Theta Nu Theta, and the other one is called Gamma Mi Chi. But he chooses Theta Nu Theta, and it is there that he goes in, and the movie really climaxes with this amazing step show. And so we see them win, and we see this coming-of-age story of them actually stomping the yard. The real lesson of the story for me is that we see these groups coming together. And when you get to the end, I know we will highlight the step show, but what I really was clean in on is how they prepared for the step show. They didn't just show up at the final examination or the final performance, but they were working hard. You saw some frustrating moments. You saw them having to grow and glean and become together, all in the part of the process, which was birthed upon their effort to get it right. And I think out of this movie, that's what we began to see. And I want to suggest, especially for you and I, as we're navigating the next normal, as we're trying to figure out how we shall be our best selves and our best opportunities, the best church we can be, here is the truth. It's going to only come with effort. Understand the only time you find success before work is in the dictionary, and the truth of the matter is it's going to take hard, intentional work in order to be successful according to the mandates of God. But let's be honest, that is the tension, because for many of us, especially over some time periods, the strain and weight of everything that we have been enduring, let's be honest, sometimes we just don't feel like giving the extra work. Sometimes we can be nonchalant, we can be laissez-faire, we can operate through things and not get our best effort. And how many of us have ever been in life having given our best effort, then only to find out we've fallen short and did not accomplish what we wanted to accomplish? And I really want to push you today, because I really want you to know that the best thing that we can experience, the victories and success, watch this, is on the other side of hard work. That's what we've come to in this text of 2 Chronicles chapter 29. We have been following this narrative. King Hezekiah, the 13th king of Judah, has reopened the temple of God, the temple that was closed by his father. And after a period of being in isolation, a period of being in disrepair, Hezekiah now comes to the point where he wants to open up the temple of God, regather the people, and recenter God in the life of the people. And as we've been navigating the first 15 verses of this chapter, we see the mandate of Hezekiah. We see the works that he wanted to do, the repairing of the doors. We see the purifying of the Levites, the rehiring them for the work that they shall be called to do. And here it is, my brothers and sisters, certain people have been set aside to do that work. And that's where we see this narrative. In verse 16, it opens with them working in the temple, cleaning out the temple. And it concludes in verse 19 with them rededicating certain important utensils at the altar of the Lord. But between verse 16 and verse 19, we see this process, this intentional work, if you will, as they come to the place to realize that sometimes in order to give God our absolute best, we got to get rid of some things. And I want to challenge you, because I know perhaps you haven't thought about it, but I want you to, if you're here, whether in person or at global, just what are some things that you have figured out I need to eliminate out of my life? What, not only what, but the who. And even as we're thinking through this process of church, what is it that we need to get rid of in order to bring back the honor and glory that God so deserves? But this elimination, this consecration, this cleansing product, it comes only when we understand that it's going to take some hard, intentional work. That's really what I want to suggest for you today. That's all I come to press this one singular point in these few verses. It pushes you and I to understand that many times you got to go beyond. You got to stretch yourselves. You got to do what perhaps may be uncomfortable, but will be necessary in order to bring about the vision and the possibilities that you see exemplified in God. This is what I want you to know, is that if we're to maximize kingdom work, it's going to be dirty work. If we are going to be the absolute best that we can be, we got to make sure that we stretch ourselves beyond even what we believe is imaginable. And I'm here to tell you, in every area of your life, if you want to win, you got to stretch. On your home, you're going to have to stretch. In your relationships, you're going to have to stretch. On your job, you're going to have to stretch. And even in the house of God, you're going to have to stretch. Every now and again, you're going to have to learn how to be uncomfortable, but you understand your uncomfortability will sometimes produce possibilities that you would have not experienced if you wouldn't have stretched yourself beyond your own capacity. I'm here to tell you that sometimes you don't know how great you can be until you stretch. You don't know what you can accomplish until you stretch. And sometimes you got to make the decision that I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'm willing to do whatever is necessary to accomplish this goal. And that's what I want you to understand. And that's why this passage is powerful for you and I, as it challenges us to understand how we together collaboratively and corporately can go beyond, how we can stretch ourselves in an effort to make sure that God's house is ready for God's people. I got a few things I really want you to really think through today. This is one of those engaging, I hope that it's a reflective message, because this is one of those things that is easy to point to other people, but this is one of those singular individual messages that makes you look at this text not as a window, but as a mirror. And the question that is causing us to face is, have we stretched as far as we can? There are a couple things. Let me give them to you real quickly that I believe that begins to push us to what this stretch means, how you and I stomp the yard corporately and collaboratively. Here's the first thing I need you to understand, that this text teaches us that in moments like this, if we're to give God our absolute best, number one, we have to go beyond what is expected. That there many times, oftentimes, we only go to what is expected. But being stretched means that many times I have to go beyond what is expected. It's right there in the text. In verse 16, note what it tells us. These purified, rehired priests, the text tells us, they go into the sanctuary of the temple of the Lord, and their main objective is to cleanse it. It's important. And I love how this text conveys it, because the first few verses above verse 16 outlines who they are. These are worshiping and working Levites who have been consecrated and purified, set apart, if you will, chosen. They have been called for this assignment. And what I love about the text is that it tells us that as soon as they got their calling, they were purified, they were rehired. Verse 16 says they go in the temple and start working. Now, here is what gets me is their job is to remove the debris, the stuff that was no longer needed in the temple. I need you to catch that and why that's significant. They have title, they have assignment, they have been chosen. They are singers and workers in the temple. But the first thing that they have to do is they have to sweep up the dirt on the ground, get rid of the cobwebs in the corner, scrub the rust from the utensils that had been discarded, and they had to make sure that they were cleaning up God's house. Now, I know this is going to perhaps turn some people off, especially those who have a post-church or pre-church mindset before everything has transpired. And if the truth be told, we would oftentimes be guilty of giving titles and giving position and giving special seating to people who didn't want to put in the work. But notice in this text, these were people with titles and with towels. These were people with positions and with brooms. These are people that had a name and were chosen and were set apart, but their first job was not to be seen, it was to clean. And every now and again, here is the challenge that you and I must understand how the next normal church is going to work, that you can no longer give out titles just to sit in a nice seat, just to have a position, just to have a name tag that people can give honor and deference to. And it doesn't matter if you're bishop or apostle or archbishop or cardinal or pope or whatever you may call yourself. Understand the first work that each one had to do is they had to do the dirty work. They had to roll up their sleeves and clean up the temple. And here is the truth. I know it may be hard to eat it, but it's going to be good when it gets down in us later on, is that this work was necessary because there was no need to have a seat or a title if you were seating in a dirty temple. So the first responsibility is to make sure that I was sweeping up the area, get rid of the dirt and the debris, get the cobwebs down, get all of the idolatrous altars and those things that were no longer necessary in the temple. Remember, the temple had been shut down, and so stuff had accumulated, things that were dirty, things that were causing disrepair and disrespect to the temple. So their first job was to clean it. They had to make sure that all that stuff was done. It reminds me of growing up in Greensboro, Saturday morning. And when I woke up hearing that gospel music, I knew it was cleaning time. I knew it was time to clean my room, take the Lysol, clean this bathroom. Come on, I know I'm not the only one that's experienced those moments. And that's what we see being played out in the text. These purified Levites and priests were now in the temple cleaning. And the text says that once they get it all out, once they clean the debris and get all the dirt out, notice what the text says. They take what they have, the dirt, the stuff that is accumulated, the cobwebs, the idolatrous altars, and they throw them in the Kidron Valley. Kidron Valley is important because this was a place of burial. It's a place where you got rid of unclean things. Matter of fact, you would even bury dead bodies in Kidron Valley. It was situated at the east of the temple. And if you're just reading this text, you would say, well, that's the right place you're supposed to send it. Take it to Kidron Valley. This is why I want to suggest they went beyond what was expected, because them going beyond what is expected is not the fact that they were sweeping up the debris, not the fact they were getting the dirt and the cobwebs, not the fact they were gathering the idolatrous altars. What I want to suggest is they went beyond what's expected because they took these things that were dirty and put them in the Kidron Valley. The reason I say they went beyond what's expected, if you go back to verse 5, part of what King Hezekiah told them is let's get the dirt and those things out and place them in the holy place. He was only requiring them to put the dirt and the stuff that was causing disrepair right outside of the temple. It was in what they considered a temporary place. He wasn't even telling them to get rid of it totally. He was saying just put it in the holy place. But when they started working, they knew the instruction. The instruction was to put it in the holy place, but they knew the holy place was a temporary place. And if they put it in the holy place, that dirt could somehow come back in the temple. It could still be tracked into the holy place. So this is what they decided to do. We know what you said to do, King, and put it in the holy place, but we don't want it stuck in a temporary place because these things need to be gone for good. So we're going to go the extra step. We're going to go beyond what's required. We're going to take it not to the holy place, but take it to the Kidron Valley. And I wish I had somebody that was rocking with me today that can testify that oftentimes in life, you got to go beyond what's required. You got to go beyond what's expected, because sometimes I know what they instructed you to do, but how many of you can testify that success and permanence and our best effort is on the other side of other people's expectation? There's somebody here that's listening to me preach that can remember in your mind the moments you just did what was expected. You just did what was required. And you know what that is? That's just being average. That's what everybody does. They just do what is required or expected of them. But we're not average people. We are great people. We are God's people, which means we go above and beyond what's expected. We're going to not leave it in the holy place. We're going to take it to Kidron Valley. And I want to talk to some brother and some sister today. I know what they've instructed you to do. Go beyond it. I know, student, what they've required of you in school. Go beyond it. I know. It's going to take a little more work. It's going to take a little more intentionality. But here's the truth. You got what it takes to go beyond what's expected. We got to begin to build that kind of work ethic in ourselves. I don't just want to do what's expected. I don't just want to do what's required. I want to go beyond that, because beyond that is how we see a stretch to our capacity. That's what our friend Dante Stewart reminded us of as he shared that illustration of that kid that was wanting to be an artist. And as he wanted to be an artist, begged his mother, will you please take me to apprentice? There's a famous artist that's in town. I would love to follow them around. Mother acquiesced to the request of the young man, and she took him there, and the artist took a liking to him and said, I'll let you follow me around for a month or so. So every day this kid came, notebook in hand, watched everything that this artist would do as he was working on sculpture after sculpture. And even sometimes the artist would let the little boy hit some of the sculpture to create his own masterpiece. After a few weeks, the artist pulled the young boy aside and said, well, what have you learned? What is it that you have gotten yourself? What is it that you've learned? He pulled out his notebook. He started talking about the unique angles for which they were trying to make the sculpture, talking about the lino blow and how it looked at the end. And the artist laughed at him and said, well, you missed the entire lesson of what I had you follow me for. I didn't have you follow me so that you can extol the end. I didn't want you to talk about the final blow that showed and exposed the masterpiece. He said, this is what I want you to know. And here's the lesson that you should have learned, that when we are creating masterpieces, our main job is to bring a sculpture out of a rock, which means it's not based on how one strike that we can do, but it's every strike before that strike that matters, which means it's the effort you put in. It's the time you put in. It's the sweat equity. And I'm here to tell you that if we're going to build back better, if we're going to grow all that God wants us to grow, it's going to take some effort, and it's going to take us going beyond what's expected. That's how you stretch. But there's another way this text also tells us to stretch, is it tells us stretch to go beyond what is allotted. Because verse 17 gives us the timeline that this project will take. It's interesting to note that he lifts up the beginning of the year, the first day they start. And after 8 days, they realize that they've only been able to clean out the outer portion of the temple. So the text says something very powerful, that they have to extend their deadline another 8 days. It takes 16 days total for them to complete the job that they have been assigned to. I will tell you, that caught me, as many of you will, that I'm a nosy reader of Scripture. And it's interesting to note that when they began, they assumed that the work would only take 8 days. But by the time they finished the 8th day, they had only gotten through the outer portion of the temple. Now, this is where they had to make a decision. We set a timeline. We made a portion of how long we assumed this was going to take. Now we've reached that deadline. And they had two options. They could stop right there, meeting their deadline with a half-finished job, or they could extend the time they had been given and move from 8 days to 16 days. And even though it was double the time, it would allow them to complete their work. In other words, they had to make a decision that I'm not just going to end up doing half work because I met my deadline. I'm going to extend the deadline, even if it's doubling my time, in order to complete the work that I've assigned to my hand. If I had time, I would tell you this thing blessed me, because I wonder how many times have we set deadlines? How many times have we set things that we wanted to accomplish? And so when we got to that portion, we had to be honest with ourselves and said we didn't make it, or said we were not finished. But how many of us have quit prematurely because you thought time ran out? But aren't you glad we serve a God that will extend our time? And he just wants to know, are you willing to put in the effort, work, and give more time, because you're more interested in completing the work than trying to meet a deadline, because every now and again your plan ain't gonna work, your time frame ain't gonna get it. And so God wants to know, can you press through the time that you had allotted? This is why this blesses me. It's because when you study it, you begin to understand that this process of cleaning the temple was a process where every area had to be cleaned before you could get access to the next area, which means the intentionality of the cleaning project was this. This was not a project you could skip steps. Each area had to be thoroughly cleaned in order to go to the next area. And then once that area was thoroughly clean, then you could go to the next area. So what slowed them down was that you couldn't skip steps. You couldn't go straight to the end. You had to make sure that each level, each area was taken care of. If I had some time, I would tell you that sometimes in life we can be guilty because we see the time ticking, because we have reached our point. We come to the point where we want to skip some steps. And so we'll start doing things. We'll start cutting corners. We'll start doing things less than our best effort in order to meet a certain time period. But when you are kingdom minded and assigned to the work of God, you understand every area I give my absolute best, which means sometimes it's going to take some time. So I'm not judging myself or my progress based on your timetable. I want to make sure I'm giving my best in the work that I have in front of me. Why is that important? Let me tell you how intentional they were. Remember, this was around the festival time. Passover is done 14 days after the first of the year, which means that when they got to day 14, they had still not finished. They decided that even though the Passover is important, the work has to be finished. So they were even willing to prolong and delay the Passover until the temple was completely clean. Why is that important? Because I could make the argument that one of the reasons why they also had to take double time is they didn't have a large crew. It was not that many of them cleaning this temple. But what I appreciate about the text is they were not complaining about who didn't show up. They didn't complain about who didn't sign up to serve. They didn't complain about who didn't come to help them sweep. They didn't complain about who didn't come to help them get cobwebs from the corner. They didn't come to talk about who didn't help them take the rust off the unused utensils. They didn't come talking about who didn't help them take the stuff to the Kinjun Valley. They didn't complain about who didn't show up. They just decided whoever is here is going to give their best effort, and we're going to work this thing out regardless of if a whole lot of people come or if it's just a few. And I want to tell you that that's been the challenge and the struggle in the Next Normal Church. We have been wrestling, trying to figure out, do we have adequate volunteers? Do we have people willing to serve? Until God had to remind me, Goodman, you ain't never had enough volunteers. You ain't never had enough people to serve. Matter of fact, Jesus said the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few, which means in this season, you and I don't have time to complain about who's not there. We don't have time to complain about who didn't show up. We ain't got time to complain about how hard the work is. Our job is to do the best that we can, and if we got to extend some time, push some stuff back in order to give our best, then we serve a God that's wanting our best work and not our rushed work. He doesn't want what your half can do. He wants you to give your absolute best in everything that you have. It was August 28th, 1955, and the Rams were playing the Giants in Portland. And this was the infancy of what we consider now the National Football League. But in this day, they had something they had never experienced before. That game, August 28, 1955, ended after 4 quarters in a tie. Up until that point, that's typically what would happen. If both teams tied at the end of 4 quarters, then the game would end with no clear winner. But the promoter of the game, a man by the name of Harry Glickman, didn't want the game to end in a tie. So he started something, this August 28, 1955, that we now still do. He decided to institute what we call overtime. He decided to extend the time beyond the 4 quarters to make sure that one team could leave the field victorious. The only way they could leave the field victorious is they had to be allotted overtime, extra time, another opportunity to complete what they could not get done in the 4 quarters they had. And I want to tell you that that's what I appreciate about God, is that he knows that sometimes 4 quarters ain't enough. He knows that sometimes your plan ain't enough. Sometimes your timetable and your clock is not enough. And I know I got somebody online and in person that's grateful you got a God that extended some time, because Lord knows you had an idea of how long things should be. You thought that by this time I should have this, and by that time I should have that. But thanks be to God, I'm working overtime. God gave me extra time because he wanted my best work and not my rushed work. You stretch because you go beyond what is expected. You stretch because you go beyond what is allotted. But then here's the third and final thing of this text, is that we stretch because we got to go beyond what is rejected. It's interesting, verse 18 and 19 comes to the climax. The work has been done. 16 days it took them to clean out the temple. What they assumed was 8 days had now been extended. But the work was now done. Now they ready to take their report to King Hezekiah. And they share with King Hezekiah how they have cleansed the temple, how all the dirt and debris, the idolatrous altars, are now gone from the temple. But their assignment was not just to cleanse the temple. They also felt a call to consecrate the temple. And so on one hand, they said, listen, it took us longer to clean than we assumed. And the stuff we took, we didn't leave where you instructed it. We left it in Kinjun Valley where we can never get it back. But we saw something. We decided that in this moment, not only should we cleanse it, we should consecrate it. That's why the text raises up some of the things that they talk about that they kept, that they cleaned up, but didn't throw away. Some stuff that had been rusted and in disrepair. They didn't group that with the dirty things that needed removal, but they cleaned up certain things, and this is what the text says. They took those things and laid them at the altar of God. You're reading the text. It talks about those table articles and those utensils. And I want you to know, these were not just some random footnotes. No, that's not what they were for. Matter of fact, the chronicler is very intentional in making sure that these items are mentioned. That it's very important that the Levites tell Hezekiah that we got rid of some things, but we also kept some things. These utensils and table articles were part of what would be considered the sacred objects of Solomon's temple. The chronicler wanted to make sure in this moment that even though they were looking forward, he needed to make sure that the people were not so forward looking that they forgot there were some things that they should keep in the next norm. See, these utensils, these table articles were important during their pre-exilic moment, before they were in captivity, before the temple had its doors locked. And these same utensils, the bread, the other things that they would need, he was saying there was no reason for us to throw them away because their usefulness was not over. Just because the temple is different, just because the people are different, just because we're getting into a new normal, there's some stuff we don't need to throw away. There's some stuff we need to hold on to because these things are going to be important in our present and our future. In other words, what the other generation rejected, what they didn't think was important, we need to polish them up, we need to get them right, and we need to lay them at the altar as a moment of consecration, because there's some things in your new normal that you need to hold on to that's going to keep you when you can't keep yourself. And I want to just declare, as I get ready to come to this climax, that here we are in our next normal. And I know we have tried hard over the last 18 months in this cyber world, in this global church. We've tried to spruce up our church. We got LED screens, we got clear podiums, we got all this fancy stuff, new cameras, and we got all that stuff, which is good, fine and dandy. But let's be clear, child of God. There's some stuff you can't throw out. There are some things you can't get away from. And I know in the new church we're trying to be relevant to everybody, but there's some stuff that had kept grandma and them over, some stuff that kept mama and them over, and some stuff that's going to keep you over. So in this new church, there's some old things you ought to polish up and place on the altar of God. You ought to polish up prayer meeting and polish up discipleship and polish up fasting and polish up reading the Bible. I know it's cool to do praise and worship, but every now and again, you ought to pull out a hymn book and say, Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No other help I know. Every now and again, I like the new stuff, but I need some old stuff too that says amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I like the new stuff, but I need some old stuff that said, I need thee every hour. I need thee. I need somebody in cyber church and in-person worship that wants to tell the Lord, I'm keeping some stuff. I'm dusting off my Bible. I'm keeping some stuff, and I'm bringing it to the altar of God. If you want to keep that old thing, I dare you to open your mouth, write old thing in the comment section and say, bring it back. Keep doing that, because that's what's going to keep us in the glory of God. Shout yeah, shout yeah, shout yeah, shout yeah. Woo! Wherever you are, if you're in person, stand. If you're watching us virtually, lean in close to your screen. That we are called in this season to stretch, which means if it's not uncomfortable, then it's probably not your best. And I want to let you know, wherever you are, in whatever space you're in, that God doesn't want us to be comfortable. This new season, this next normal, is going to require a lot more of us. It's going to require us to go beyond what's expected and sometimes go beyond what's allotted, and it's going to take us to go beyond what is rejected. I was thinking about this, and I'm done, especially to our cyber audience and those in person, the season has been interesting and weird and strange from this perspective that I just don't know. I get the question all the time, how are the views? I don't know. I don't check them every week. How many people are y'all filling up the building? I say they're coming, but I don't check that either. And that took a lot for me because I will admit to you, one thing that COVID had done for me, it released me. It took a weight off me. And what COVID did, one of the blessings for me personally, is that it released me from the burden of the disappointment of others. And I finally got comfortable knowing you can't please everybody. It's okay. So the pledge and promise I made to God is, God, I want to make the absolute best decision, best effort that I can do. And that may not meet everybody's expectation. I'm okay with that. Because that's not what I can control. I can't control how many people come. I can't control how many people click on. That's not my control. What God told me is, Goodman, that I'm hoping in this moment, because we've done a great job of learning church, but we've done a poor job of learning God. And what we've got to challenge ourselves in this season is there's some things we just can't get rid of. I know the tendency, I was hearing all the statistics about global church, and there's some places that will never be physical. They only be digital, and those things are cool if that's their space. But I would hope, and my prayer is that we not get rid of the things that are timeless. I still believe in prayer. I still believe in fasting. I still believe in reading the Bible. I do. I still believe in the fellowship of the saints. These are disciplines and things that are important. So as we're moving into the next normal, as we're merging global and in person, my aim as your pastor, honestly, is to really push us to that point of reclaiming those things that many people perhaps don't even feel as important. I've done a disservice to you as your pastor if I just preach to you, but you don't have no idea what I'm talking about because you don't know the word for yourself. I can pray for you all day long, but you do know you can pray for yourself. And that's what we hope and pray in this moment. There's some stuff we get rid of, absolutely. There's some things I'm glad that God has given us a chance to start over again and get rid of some things. Not just put them in a temporary place, but a permanent place. But there's a lot of things that we don't need to get rid of. We need to clean up, put it at the altar. I'm praying that we once again have the priority of the altar again. That should be what it is about. And if we do our part, I'll let God handle the rest. So listen, as we extend that to you, maybe there's someone who doesn't know God for themselves. If you're watching us via our tab Global, you'll see the multiple ways from sending that word connect to the number on the screen, or even email us at connectwithus@tbcaugusta.org, or even go to our website right where you are. Or matter of fact, put it in our comment section. We have an amazing team that's ready to engage with you, send you some information. We want to pray with you. I want you to know that wherever you are, we would absolutely love to be your church. I would absolutely love to be your pastor. God, we thank you again for this moment to come and to share, to hear your word preached and proclaimed with power and with clarity. So now, God, stretch us. Help us be better for you. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you. We thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Yo, what's up, Tab?
Hey, Tab.
I fam. We hope that y'all were blessed by that worship experience today, and another sermon series of our series, Homecoming, back at the Tab. You know, as me and Z, we are right now back at the Tab, but we are so grateful that you showed up today online and are continuing to invest in our community, you too are a part of this family. And we wanted to say that you have a place here, and we're glad that you showed up today.
We are glad, and please make sure you connect with us on our social media and our website with all the great stuff we have coming up. If you're local, we do have our trunk or treat, amen, at the end of the month. We are partnering up with the city of Augusta and our Heart Radio Media, so we are excited about what we're going to do for the community for the Halloween season. Also, if you can, hey, donate some candy.
Yes,
hey,
we need the candy.
Hey, even for those our ITAF family who are out and about, amen, across the globe,
you can
amen.
Send some here.
You can send some. You can
What's
mail
the
some
address?
candy here.
1223 Laney Walker Boulevard. Come on now.
Yeah, just mail us the candy. We need some candy. We need some candy. Also, this is Stewardship Month, so please get plugged in. Our small groups are doing a segment every Monday just for us to focus in on what stewardship really is. So please make sure you get connected with that. But we got a lot coming with you, so make sure you plug in and get connected. All right.
Indeed.
So what is our closing word?
Our closing word, in light of being connected and plugging in and being connected, so much of what we do here is dependent on you.
Yeah.
And this closing word is simply a word of thanks. We want to thank you for the way that you plug into this community, the way that you hold us down. So much of the way we function is rooted in your investment. You're showing up for us, and we are so grateful. If you're here in Augusta or if you're somewhere across the globe, we are thankful for you. So thank you.
Yes.
Keep showing up.
Yes.
And Tab, we will keep showing out.
All right.
Hey, y'all
Love
be
you.
blessed.